Weather is pretty miserable today. I made it to Urabamba, just barely. I took a colectivo, which is a traditional ride-sharing system here, where you show up at a corner somewhere in Cusco, and they have these little minivans that go to a couple of different cities. I was crammed in the back with a very wide, broad-shouldered old lady and her giant bundle of goods. And for an hour and a half, was completely crammed in there. I couldn't reach my camera, but you'll have to take my word for it that there are some great views of the valley along the way. It's cold and wet, and I haven't had a proper breakfast yet. I'm not even trying to be in Urabamba. Actually, I have to go further. But there is an interesting thing in this town, I think. Let's see. It is, of course, like everything else, on top of a hill. So, gotta walk up there first. Like everything else, it's up a hill, and also a lot further away than it seems. Here it is, the Palace of Huayna Capac. It looks like it's currently being used as a graveyard. Let's try over here. So Huayna Capac was a Sapa Inca, and one of the last Sapa Inca at the height of the Incan Empire. He helped expand the Incan Empire to the north, to what is now Ecuador, and set up the capital of Ecuador, Quito, as a second capital for the Incan Empire. And here he had a palace. Huayna Capac was the last Sapa Inca who did not meet the Spanish. However, he still had an encounter with them in a way, because when he was in Ecuador, he contracted smallpox and died. The smallpox having been spread down the continent from Central America and other places where the Spanish already were, even though they hadn't arrived in Peru or Ecuador yet. These are the walls of his palace. Part of it's being used as a graveyard, and part of it for other things. This seems to be the only entrance there, but it looks like it's being used as a cornfield right now. So he not only had this massive palace built, he also completely terraformed the valley. He moved the river to the southern side, drained a bunch of swamps. Well, he didn't do it. He had 20,000 workers do it for him. And he permanently resettled some 3,000 people because once he had terraformed it and built terraces and left a forest as a hunting ground for himself and done all these other things, he resettled 2,500 people to live and tend the grounds of his palace. Besides that, he also opened something similar to a nunnery, where young women would go and they would learn to cook and to weave, to make chicha, traditional fermented drink, which is made by chewing corn and spitting it out and letting the enzymes and bacteria ferment it. And these sorts of nunneries, they would take the most beautiful women in the entire land, and they'd come there and they'd learn to do all those things, and then they would be married off to powerful Incas, maybe even the Sapa Inca himself. And looks like should be a kiln, well-preserved ceramics kiln somewhere nearby, and a bunch more of his palace, but I can't really seem to find it, so it's onwards to my next destination. Although first I think I'll look for something to eat, if I can find anything. It's quite cold up in the mountains, but pretty warm and jungle-like down here, humid, and that makes it a perfect environment for growing corn, which is why Huayna Capac decided to build his palace and massive estate here. Because corn was a prestige crop for the Incas, because they could turn it into alcohol via chicha. Looks like there might be some food down this way. You can get an eighth of a chicken and a lemonade here for 10 sols, which is $2.50. I made it to the Museum Inkariy. I think that's how it's pronounced. No idea how I'm going to get back, but I'll deal with that after the museum. So now I'm here inside the museum. It has many rooms, and each one is devoted to a particular culture that existed in Peru in ancient times. Now, they knew how to play flutes in Corral, and they found some of the oldest flutes in all of the Americas there. Corral is on the coast of Peru, next to Lima. It's in the desert. And it's famous because they had pyramids, older than the Great Pyramids in Egypt. And quite a few. They were discovered relatively recently. And they had, as well, great temples and worshipped fire, which was very important to them. Here you can see a reconstruction of the haircuts that are found on their figurines, and it seems that the men wore pigtails and bangs. Now here's the reason I've been traveling all day, because this is a wax museum, and wax museums always freak me out. Here you can see them doing a fire ritual, playing flutes, of course. They have some ropes there, and an egg, it looks like. Next on the list is Chavin, actually Chavin de Huantar. Let's see what we've got here. Chavin de Huantar is located up in the Andes, but very far north of Cusco, north of Lima even. I wanted to go there originally, maybe one day in the future I still will. But it's very hard to get there because you have to go from Lima to Huaraz, and from Huaraz into the mountains. But they had really elaborately decorated pottery and also stone carvings. Now, this culture is very interesting because they were able to spread very far and wide via not warfare, it seems, but religious influence. Here's some of the clothing that the priests would wear, some of the metal artifacts that are found left behind. Now, this culture is from the period BC. I'm not sure exactly which century, but hundreds of years BC. And they built this amazing temple there, which is something I hope to visit one day. But what's amazing about this temple is that inside of it is a massive labyrinth that can still be visited. And in that labyrinth, They used to do religious rituals with people dressed in elaborate costumes, playing music on seashells from very far away from the sea, and probably would take psychedelic drugs for these rituals. It's the sort of carvings they have on the outside of the labyrinth. Oh, and here they... Oh my god, it's like being in the labyrinth. Oh, it's dark over there. I'm not gonna go there. Oh god. This is someone singing music. Oh god. Ah, it's the sacred stone of the labyrinth of Wantar, Chavin de Wantar. Stone is shaped like a puma, and it lies at the center of the labyrinth. This is where the main rituals would occur. This is a replica, of course, because the real one is still in the labyrinth. Now, it's said that the Chavin culture created textiles, invented them, but it reached a height under the Paracas culture, who would weave very elaborate shawls and textiles and use a great deal of natural dyes. And many of their textiles have been found in the desert near Lima. They also started making very elaborate pottery and other things from ceramics, like masks. One of the things that the Paracas culture is famous for is for their cranial deformation. They used to bind the skulls of people at a very young age to distort them using various techniques. And this was how you could tell the elite from other people in the social spectrum. They were also among the first to practice surgery and trepanation, which they would numb using coca leaves. You can see they would put in gold plates sometimes, and there's been skulls found like this that have many different points of trepanation that healed over, so they were quite successful at it. They would also mummify their dead, wrapping them in many layers of cloth in the fetal position. Here you can see the Paracas people and their deformed skulls lowering someone down into a tomb. And there the other people are putting the body in the right place and making sure the offerings are set up the right way. You see they all have very deformed heads. Next up is the mochicha. Here we have replicas of mochicha pottery, which depicts various ones of their gods that we see in artwork that they made. The mochicha were also in the north of Peru, and they're interesting because they're the first ones that seem to have holy rulers, not just a ruling priest class, but kings who are worshipped as demigods, who've been depicted very beautifully in this pottery. Here's a Mochicha woman with, I don't know what that is, some kind of pipe. Very elaborate golden headdress. And the Mochicha also built very elaborate pyramidal structures along the main rivers which they inhabited. Very complex temples with many rooms for their ruling elite, and also for religious reasons, to worship the sun and the moon to which they were aligned. Here you can see among the first Peruvian kings who are worshipped like demigods, and the worship of the sun. The Incans would also later be carried around like this and have giant golden discs with rays emanating from them. And here we see some kind of ceremonial parade with music and trumpets and drums, a procession of the Holy King. And next up is the Nazca. Because they lived in the desert, they didn't have much water, and frogs and shrimp and mushrooms were all considered to be very holy to them because it symbolized that water was nearby. They also had these elaborate sort of trumpets. They were constantly looking for water, and that some people think that's what the Nazca lines may be about. They also dug giant wells in the earth to find that water. Some of them very deep to reach the water line. And here are some of the images from the famous Nazca lines that you might recognize. Frog, fish, bird, monkey, bird, 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 star, bird, fish. Damn, look at these guys. Okay, there's someone playing that musical instrument, the giant drum. Flute. She looks like she's high. Sort of like a Bedouin headdress. All of the cloths from this time have been preserved because they were buried in the desert. There are many hats and such in the museums. You can see they're doing a ritual for water. They're planning one of their wells. They think that the water is here, and now they're going to start digging down to secure it. This looks like the leader of the bunch. Now you can see the Wari had a big empire. And there's Piquiacto, where I was the other day. You can look for that video if you want. Now the Wari were a diplomatic confederation of many small states, not really a centralized state. Although they say the Wari capital, the biggest Wari city, was in the city of Wari. The Wari had a big ruling elite. And they love to drink out of these enormous vessels and have giant celebrations. And a lot of their pottery has to do with drinking. Cups, of course, other vessels. It seems they didn't have an organized army. The ruling elite had weapons and were equipped for war, but when it came time to actually invade or fight someone, they would just get farmers from around the area to go with them. It looks like the person's being strangled to death. But they have lots of depictions of the ruling warrior elite in their pottery and things. And one of the outstanding elements of Wari architecture is that they would have these semicircular chambers with many niches where people would sit, and it would be a sort of council for resolving problems and determining punishments for people who had committed crimes. It looks a lot like Kenko, where I was the other day, which makes me think maybe Kenko was originally a Wari site. Here we have two criminals who have been brought before the Wari Council. You can see all the rulers are deliberating their fate. I don't think it's going to end well for these guys. Lambeyaque Chimu. I've never heard of this civilization. I've heard of Chimu. Lambeyaque Chimu. So this is a very interesting culture. As you can see, it's based far to the north of Lima in northern Peru, near Trujillo. And it was around there. It was about from the years 900 to 1100 AD. What's very interesting is that according to their mythology, their civilization was founded by someone who came from the sea, and wherever he stepped they would pour powder of various colors. And so people think that perhaps this was a visitor somewhere from Central America or even North America. And you can see from these masks that it sort of resembles Mesoamerican artwork in a way. It makes me think of ancient Mexico and the civilizations there. In any case, they were very fine goldsmiths. And you can see these very elaborate golden costumes. I think these might be related to the lords of Sapan, but I'm not sure. You can see they would have been very elaborately decked out in gold. Another interesting thing is that they would each build a palace for themselves. That was the capital of their kingdom, these 10 rulers, and afterwards they would be buried inside of them. And so the palace that they had in life would be a mausoleum after death. And there's still many of those to be seen in the city of Chan Chan, an ancient site in northern Peru, which I would like to go to one day. And finally, the Inca. Here we have an Incan court of one of the great Sapa Incas. In Coricancha, or Intihuasi, the House of the Sun, where I was the other day. And behind you can see an image of the sun god, the great golden disc, and on all the people that have gathered from various lands throughout the Incan Empire to pay tribute to the great Sapa Inca. You can see some are decked out in costumes of green feathers. Everyone with different costumes coming from different corners of the land. Many different types of hats. This guy looks like he's from the desert. And you can imagine that this is what Coricancha would have looked like on the days of the winter solstice, when the Sapa Inca would take in his hand a polished mirror, and on that day the sun rising and shining perfectly through the windows would reflect off of the solar disk the image of Inti into his hands, and then he would use that to light a great ceremonial fire in the center of Coricancha. Here's someone reading a quipu. Here we have a replica of the mummy, the great Pachacutec whose mummy was said to be the most venerated. You can see that he has golden thread in his clothing and wearing a very elaborate hat. And of course with very huge earrings, because the Inca all had very big, broad earrings. Very rich fabrics. So his mummy's now lost, but this gives you an idea of what it would be like. Here we have a map of the Chapacanyan, the Incan road system, which leads to Cusco. You can see there's not much to the north of Cusco. And there's probably lots of sites along these roads that haven't been excavated yet. Going down all the way from Chile, what is modern day Chile, through Argentina, Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, even a bit of Colombia, even though they don't show the border on this map. This is a quipu, a great quipu. I didn't know this, but apparently the quipu originated all the way back in Corral 5,000 years ago. And different colors would be used, as well as different knots at different points in the rope to encode information. This could be read and interpreted by a group of people called the Quipu Kamayak, who were sort of wise men who knew how to read these things. I'm looking for a bathroom. They said there's one over here somewhere. Oh, it's a guinea pig farm. Oh, they're gonna eat all of you. Wow. Okay. Well, I guess I'm in Urco. Let's see what that's like. Well, I bumped into a man who was struggling carrying a bunch of very heavy bags. And I helped him carry them up the mountain a little bit, but he said that Urco is a 25-minute walk. The people at the farm told me it was only 5. 25 is too long because it's getting late. I have to make it back to Cusco before it gets too dark. It's raining as well. Oh, and it's still a long way back, so I'm gonna get going. No, wait, that one was going in the right direction. I need to go back to Urabamba, I think. I can go to Urabamba or I can go to Calca. But I think Calca is further away from Cusco than Urabamba, so I'm going to go back to Urabamba. Now, Urabamba might be a smaller city than Cusco, but don't let anyone tell you that it's a lesser city, because they have something here in Urabamba that I've been looking for an entire week in Cusco, and that I've been unable to find. And it's here at this gas station. Refrigerated meat. And butter even. They even have refrigerated butter.